What's going on, everybody? Welcome to another Acrylic Thursday. Today we have quite the challenge ahead of us. We are going to be doing a John Singer Sargent study with acrylics. So let me preface this by saying I'm not trying to pretend like this is going to be an oil painting, apples and oranges. This is not going to be an oil painting. This is going to be an acrylic painting. So I like to work on white with acrylic because it's kind of difficult to build up the layers of color. The end goal is going to be to create a painting that is reminiscent of a John Singer Sargent. So hey Hansel Dog and Vagala Giselle May, welcome everybody. So let's go ahead and get started. What I'm gonna do is mix up the background color first. Try to get something close to what you see in the reference. And we're going to work from the outside to the inside. We are going to use a very painterly type approach for this. So get ready for a wild ride. By the way, this palette, the Stay Wet palette, which is listed in the description box for you, has not been cleaned, or I haven't used it since last time. Typically I do a study before the stream, but I didn't do one for this painting because I think this is probably my 5th time that I've done this same Sargent. So I feel prepared enough. Probably just jinxed myself, but I feel prepared enough to just attack this one. Let's add some more color onto the palette. I just ran out of blue. Like I said, I haven't used the palette since last week. It holds the paint pretty well, as you can tell. It is even more practical than an oil painting palette. So for a studio painting, like a long involved studio painting, the Stay Wet palette is going to be essential. So getting blocking in the outside. Use this to guesstimate the drawing a little bit. Something I would do with oil paint, but I'll do this with acrylic. It's not really going to change much. Just to give it kind of a feel of an oil painting start. I'm gonna go ahead and change the light sensitivity a little bit. Seems to be a tad bit bright. Okay. Now let's go ahead and start to mix some stuff. I'm gonna go ahead and mix up the shadow, the side of the face. And that shadow should be maybe a tad bit cooler. just like this, something like that. Yep, there we go, something like that. How's everybody doing today? It's really exciting to be back. This is the 4th week in a row with this schedule, I think. Guesstimation for where the nose is going to eventually fit. Nice and simple there. Forehead is going to approximately be somewhere over there. Ooh, we got some paint starting to dry. What you want to do is wet the sponge underneath of the palette at least once a week. I didn't do that this week. Or last week. I don't think I did that last week. So I'm really kind of pushing what can be done with the Stay Wet palette. Cancel dog, I'm glad you're doing well. Yeah, it is. It's hot here too. It's about 91 Fahrenheit. Right, black, brown, red, hair, ear, somewhere over there. Painting the head like a wig maker's block. That's what Sargent would say. The features of the face are like the spots on an apple, is what he would say. Making his face a little bit larger, so I'm going to eventually put the back of his hat over there. Another quote from Sargent: every time I paint a portrait, I lose a friend. The thicker you paint, the more it flows. I wonder what he would think about acrylics. You know, most oil painters don't take too well to acrylics at first. And it takes us time to use it to really appreciate it. Though Sargent, having had plenty of experience with watercolor, would have adjusted pretty well, I think. Pretty well. Now we're gonna mix up a pretty similar value to the shadow, perhaps a tad bit cooler. But if it's the same, that's okay. But if it's the same as the shadow, no big deal. This is gonna be for that Sargent stash. Very fitting for the time. It's a thunderstorm outside. I can hear it. I don't know if you can hear it. I myself like storms. I'm strange like that. But if the internet cuts out here and there, which is to be expected with a thunderstorm, just know that I will be here. Hey, Lanthan Land. The quote about losing friends when painting a portrait. So every time, as Sargent said, every time he painted a portrait, he lost a friend. Basically, my interpretation of it is, well, when you're painting a portrait that is a commission, because, well, Sargent mainly only did commissions, and when he did paint his friends, he made it known he would write something on the top to so and so. But what I translated to is people in the non-art world, non non-oil painters or acrylic painters or just non-painters tend to want that kind of like smiley picture, make me look younger, make sure my hairline doesn't look so far back, those kind of aesthetics. And as portrait painters, the aesthetics is secondary to the painting itself, the fact that it is a painting. So, I think Sargent just had to probably deal with a lot of clients that maybe were friends, and then I'm sure Sargent just kind of exaggerated, or maybe not. Who knows? People were kind of tough back in those days, like didn't hold back. So, yeah, clients that were maybe friends or just like, is my nose really that big? Is my hairline really that far back? Things like that. That's what that quote means, at least my interpretation of it. Wow, I really did let the paint dry on this. It's actually kind of dry in this area here. Oh well, we could work with that. That's my interpretation. That's why whenever you're doing a commission or you're, painting a friend, always remind them that it's a painting. If you want a photographic look, then take a picture. Have an AI do it for you for a fraction of the cost. Of course, Sargent couldn't say that. Well, just have an AI paint it for you. No, I mean, even back in Sargent's time, there was photography. Sargent was known to have a little mini. I don't know if it was mini, but he had a projector, and those did exist back in the day. And I think, Sargent, I don't think he needed it to draw. I really laugh when people say, people like Caravaggio or Vermeer used things like the camera obscura and stuff to draw. That's just nonsense. Sure, he could use it to, say, get a composition down or whatever. There's so much more to drawing than just the outlines. That's a whole different subject. But then again, I personally don't think using camera obscura or any kind of device is really necessarily cheating. That's a question I get a lot. Now we're gonna go right back into the shadow shapes. Do some work with that. It's a bit darker, more towards the brown. Like that. We'll push the nose out, don't worry. Everything is just in simple shape form. And just for the sake of clarity, I'm going to put this shape for his hat and then retouch that before we get into the lights. Just because I want to have the whole big picture addressed first, just like Sargent would. This is, like I said, this is a very exciting stream to do. Where is everybody? Where is everyone? We got about half of the people that are usually here. I'm doing a live stream. Okay, see you. Yeah, so where is everybody? Got this little hat in there. And then the shadow for the hat, of course. Oh, thanks. the likeness was pretty fast. I mean, excuse me. I have painted this study many times. When I had first, when I was just getting into painting, this was one of the first ones I did. And a couple times for my students, I painted the same portrait. So I may have a slight unfair advantage in that I've painted this so many times. But each time I learn something new. This time definitely we'll learn a lot of stuff because, well, we're using acrylic. But I don't have any issues at all using acrylic for a Sargent-like painting. None at all. And that's just because if you work with shapes, really no big issues here. It's just any other portrait. Hey Hansel Dog, I'm glad Sargent is one of your favorites. You said it. They may be heading out. Hey, Craft-O-Matic for Labor Day weekend. Perhaps. I hope everyone stays safe. I wish you safety in your holiday travels. Anyone traveling for Labor Day? I am not. I'm gonna be here. Saturday, I may actually go paint from life with one of my friends from way back who has an art studio in her apartment, or not apartment, in her town home in Baltimore. I know I'm gonna drive 2 hours just to go paint from life on Saturday. Or I can just drive 15 minutes and go play pool. But painting takes precedence. Gonna hit the background with another layer. Craft-O-Matic, have you tried using a wet sponge under your palette paper? Yeah, this has a sponge under it. This is the Stay Wet palette. So yeah, it's got a sponge. I also I don't know if it does anything, but I put a quarter underneath to prevent like mold or whatever. I think that's what it says on in the description of the palette, or I don't know, maybe someone else told me that. I don't remember. But I've got a quarter underneath. Maybe it'll help prevent mold, I don't know. There we go, that's a closer color, even though it looks too light. Very important that we get this background situated before moving into the light for the face, especially for the Sargent look. Elizonian, so I use acrylics especially for if oils is your main medium. You mean for this study? I'm using acrylics for this study in particular for specifically for people that can only use acrylics because of health concerns and things like that. There's people that can only use acrylics and are fans of Sargent. Types of paintings like Sargent, so I just want to show that it is possible. I'm doing this for people that can't use oil paint. Show you how to do it, show you that it's possible. That's my goal. Versatility and cost effectiveness is one reason in your opinion. Yeah, I mean the versatility, the cost effectiveness of acrylic is really huge. Very cost effective. I mean, I found some tubes of like yellow or something. I found this raw sienna for like 45 cents at Office Depot. So let's just add it here. Let's just use it, even though it's off camera. Okay, now let's block in some light. Hey, Latham Land. Well, if you practice with acrylic using the same approach that you use with oil paint, if you paint wet on wet like alla prima, it can be a little different because you can't paint wet on wet. You paint wet on dry with acrylic. It'll definitely cause some issues, but if you practice different techniques, different approaches, and you eventually will find something that works. The question is it even worth the extra effort? Maybe not. So if everything is working just fine with oil paint, there's no need to change it. You know the old saying, don't fix it if it ain't broke. So here, I'm using 45-cent paint, everyone. 45-cent paint for this Sargent. And look at that, just the raw sienna and the white, the raw sienna that I got from Office Depot. Now we're blocking this in. Killing off the rest of the white. Okay. Might have left some in the borders, but that's all right. Now we get to go into planes. We get to go into the planes, and then we take liftoff. Hey, May had a homemade stay wet palette for a long time. It's a plastic container with paper, thin sponge for dishwashing. Oh, good, good. Yeah, see, you can make your own stay wet palettes. I used to do something like that for when I was painting pumpkins during the October time, which I will do again. Paint some pumpkins. Look forward to that, especially now that I have more experience with acrylic. Now we go ahead and add some planes. Just use this to kill off the white. And of course we can use this for the goatee or sideburn. I think this is, yes, sideburn. Simple shapes, real nice and easy. Add a little bit of black to soften this shape here. Nice and easy. That's one of the few times you'll see me use wet into wet because I have to mix so fast. Hey man, yeah, parchment paper does work well for that. I used to, yeah, when I was painting the pumpkins, I was using parchment paper. Yeah, for sure. Here's something I like to do once I have this light figured out, and it's not all the way dry, but it is acrylic. It'll be dry in the blink of an eye anyway. Once I put this light in, I'll go back into it with really light planes. And that's just because it dries darker. So this will not look this bright after it's dry. But this is how I build up the planes. As Sargent would say, keep the portrait like a wig maker's block at first. It's mainly white with a touch of 4-5 cent. I think it was raw sienna. You could say 15% or more. No, just kidding. Yeah, adding the light, knowing that it will dry slightly darker, making sure that these big shapes are relatively correct. That's pretty much where all of that light is going to exist. We'll leave this alone for now. Now we'll mix the red. More of that. It's actually a pretty good color for portrait. Raw sienna. And more white. This is a very affordable way to paint. If I could just find where did I put the white paint? There it is. Doesn't cost all that much. It's not the fancy, expensive ones. I haven't purchased those yet, and I don't know. Really, I'm not having any issues with these. The old saying, don't fix it if it ain't broke. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. Hansel Dogs, this is a Sargent, John Singer Sargent study. He's probably the most famous oil painting portrait painter of all time. At least to this, I mean, during these times, he's probably one of the most famous. In May, he used a water spray. Yeah, I had a bunch of students mention that they see a lot of people use a water spray. Some people use a second brush for some reason. I mean, whatever works really. I just like letting the acrylics be fast drying, like fast dryers. Let acrylics be acrylics. The Sargent nose. Told you I'd fix that. Going with a little bit of the dark, the darkness. So I'm basically kind of following around the directionality of the planes. I did a drawing correction there with the nose, really easy to do if you keep your shape simple and easy. No stress. Now it may look kind of weird because we have a little circle there for where his eye is going to fit. Almost like he's kind of winking at you. But I assure you, those things are just temporary. It is part of the awkward stage. The stuff that goes unfinished that makes it look strange because it's human. Wait, it's not human. But why does it look human? So if it looks somewhat human, and it starts to bother you because, well, humans don't look like that. So it's one of those psychological things that make portraiture in particular very difficult in terms of the psychology of it, that unfinished face, that scary stage. So 30 minutes in, a little more than 30 minutes in, and I've got the entire background covered. We're blocking in the face. So everything is going according to plan. Plane change here. To all my acrylic painters that are fans of Sargent, this is for you. All my acrylic painters that want to paint like oil painting. All those years everyone is asking that be done with acrylic. It can be done. Now we're starting to put in a side plane for the cheek. Again, it's going to look strange at first. Don't fight the fast drying nature of the paint. Just let it be. Keep your shapes simple and easy. Of course, I mean no disrespect to Sargent. I turned Rembrandt into a Santa Claus, and then all of a sudden, I had like half of the Rembrandt internet fans try to attack me. So, any devout Sargent fans that may think that I'm trying to make fun of Sargent by painting one of his paintings in acrylic, it's not what I'm doing. Trying to show what's possible. I'm quite comfortable with these shapes, and that raw sienna actually makes the skin tones a little bit faster to paint, to be honest. And I aim to make this so simple that it should be outlawed. So simple that it should be outlawed. Can painting really be this simple? Oh yes. Without a worry in the world. Because what are we doing? We're working with basic shapes. Drawing with the shapes. Not fighting the acrylic. Let the acrylic be acrylic. You'll thank me later. Or not. Kind of like a yellowish gray green, pretty similar to the background for the maxilla, not the maxilla, the mandible area, the upper regions of the jaw, right up there. I'll start to throw in some more accents for the planes. I have to add some more red soon. Oof, too dark. Don't worry about the soft edges for the eyebrows. We'll add that later. Just add some more red as we're gonna need it. Hansel dog, yep. These are all acrylic brushes. I would not recommend using bristle brushes for acrylic. You don't want to use oil painting brushes for acrylic, but you can do the reverse. It is entirely possible. block that in. A bit of an eye. A little bit of an eye for the other side. Woo! That got way too dark. Way too dark. Better. The features of the face are like spots on an apple, somewhat, but not really. It's going to be more than a spot. Way more than a spot. Hey, Giselle. Oh, thank you for that comment. Thank you. Side plane of the lower eyelid. You know, studying the old masters is really, really important, especially when you're painting from life and you see a setup that's similar to what you saw. So I've painted numerous models that actually looked like Sargent's, and I could recognize that right away. I mean, in my early 20s. So I had an advantage over people that didn't do those studies. A huge, huge advantage. Only disadvantage I have is I can't find my brushes. Alright, there we go. Found a brush. So a little bit of a grayish color with a hint of skin tone for the sclera. This is one of my top 10 most favorite self-portraits. I really enjoy the simplicity of the planes, the fluidity of the mark making, the color, which was a new concept back then. He has some cooler colors in the skin tones, which we'll get to. I think I might be pushing it, but let's do this. Tad bit darker. Appreciate all the likes. Those of you that have left a like. Appreciate all of you watching. Darker yet somewhat warm brownish color for the eyelid, shadow for the eyelid, upper eyelid. Get that brush stroke, oil painter brush stroke look. I'll use the same color to correct the drawing for the hair. Real simple to do. And add that soft edge. I guess Sally wrote your soap parchment paper for 15 minutes. Oh, in boiling water. Cool. I never actually thought of that one before. And yeah, Sargent does push color for sure. He did push color more than some of his contemporaries, but remember, he was a contemporary to the Impressionists, so he met Monet and got to do plein air. So he was during the time where things were really starting to be a little more expressive, I guess. And yeah, he did push color a lot, but not to the extent of like Nelson Shanks. And remember, it's not the brush stroke of Sargent that makes him Sargent. It's his handling of color, planes, values, all the good stuff. That's what makes Sargent Sargent. So yeah, let's go ahead and tackle the color now a little bit. See. So may you only ever use lukewarm water for wetting sponge. I just kind of use whatever. Like I said, this has been sitting, so yeah, we want to get that value because it's gonna, that color and value. I had to lighten the value a tad because it will directly impact the skin tones. So Sally wrote DIY off the internet. Maybe I should upload a video like that. How to make your own stay wet palette. But you know, I don't know if I've ever done a video like that. That's not directly just painting. I mean, I've done some videos of traveling to reptile expos. I think that's my video with the least views, which kind of makes sense. Light against dark, dark against light. Rembrandt is the one that made this more popular. Sargent and all of them just used it. So we're going to be taking a break in 9 minutes. So right on time. When we return, we'll start to add more subtlety into the planes. But before that, let's add a little touch up to the colors, the skin colors. So not quite that extreme. That's pretty good. Now remember, this will dry darker, so you have to have really good perception of your values when you're doing this. We painted just heavy enough that the paint stayed wet a tad bit longer. So Sargent says the thicker you paint, the more it flows. With acrylic, the thicker you paint, the longer it takes to dry. Which is useful if you're doing stuff like this, where you want it to stay active for a little while longer. Anticipate that it will dry darker. Use that to your advantage. DSL, he wrote, do you ever finish an acrylic painting with oil? Seems it's done a lot. And artist competition shows. I mean, it's probably done a lot in cases where there's not a lot of time for an underpainting, and an artist has a very strict underpainting process. You can do a similar underpainting process with acrylic that you would do with oil paint in a fraction of the time. That's if someone is relying heavily on their underpaintings, which is fine. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. But no, typically no, I don't. If I'm doing an acrylic, I typically just let it be acrylic the whole way. But yeah, if someone has a strict underpainting process, then it would make sense that they would do the underpainting part in acrylic and then do the rest with the oil paint, all the subtlety stuff. Alright, so about 4 minutes till the break. And a hair dryer, yeah, you could. I mean, I guess that would mean that your acrylics or the person's acrylics are drying extra slow. Depends on the humidity, conditions like that. Oh, the pink for the cheekbone. Already getting into subtlety, so a little bit ahead of time. And we'll use that for the ear as it's gotten a little dark. It has become somewhat darker than it should have been. That's good enough for now. I'm holding back on the subtleties a little bit. Sargent type brush stroke there, even though that should be a little more blue. I will blend that out a little bit. Yeah, you can just a lot of things you can do, and yeah, it's great to a ground to work on as well. Yep. To add your oil painting to onto a layered acrylic. But as you see here, we have kind of the fluidity of an oil painting, and we could even let it be if we wanted to after the first break, and it'd be a Sargent-esque kind of painting. But of course, we're not going to do that. We're going to continue to work on it. So I'm going to go ahead and take a break. As usual, I'm going to play the video of Hugo. I know I've got to edit another one, so we have another one to watch during the break. But for those of you that haven't seen it, hopefully you will enjoy the little video of Hugo. I'll play it for a little while I take a break, and then I'll return and we'll get right into the subtleties of this painting. Okay, I have returned. Hopefully you enjoy the short video of Hugo, my Shiba Inu. Oh, thanks Craftomatic. I'm glad you enjoy the footage of Hugo. So let's get into subtleties now. On the palette, I would suggest that you create a string of skin tone. And it's not like there's that much, right? And if you thought this was oil paint, well, here's that. There's your proof. That's not oil paint. So I'm gonna create a string of value. Maybe start over here. And we're gonna work our way that way. And we're gonna use the colors that are already on the palette. This is why it's important to have a stay wet palette, because these colors will stay wet. And you don't have to remix. Hey May, well thanks. I hope Hugo will be a star someday. See the color value string start to emerge, and then as we approach white, it will be the lightest. Okay, there it is. There's your little string this way. Dark to light, light to dark, dark to light. Middle in the middle. And we're going to use this as our little basis for our mixtures. First though, anything that has sunken in, like the darks for the hair, will be taken care of. I'm going to use the medium. The, what is it called again? It's called Drop It on Your Foot. It's called Golden Glaze, Gloss Glazing Liquid. Not that I'm going to be glazing anything, but it just helps to thin out the paint, yet create a nice kind of glossy look, which is important for not just oil painting, but with acrylic as well. Especially within the darks. The darkness. I'm not laughing because of the painting. It's just something I heard of. Something happened during the break, which is not a funny thing, but long story short, everyone's safe, but a ceiling caved in my in-laws. They don't watch these streams anyway, but it's just the timing is just ironic, like crazy. I mean, I was like just there walking my in-laws' dog yesterday. It's crazy. Subtlety for the corner of the eye. What's most important about this stage is patience, especially with acrylic. And don't paint so thick in this stage, especially, once again, especially with acrylic. You really don't want to paint that thick. you want to use the transparency of the paint, as it is acrylic, so it's pretty transparent. Remember that value comes before color, especially when you're trying to paint form. However, the more comfortable you become experimenting with color, the more control you will have making planes like that more blue or green relative to surrounding ones. Touch of red. A bit lighter. See how I'm relying on the Stay Wet palette? And back in the day, for Sargent, efficiency, he would call it economy of means, was quite important. So, working this way wasn't always just for the marketing, although a lot of it was. But when you're making a living doing art, any kind of, not just painting, but you want to be able to have a repeatable process, basically like a system. And you can tell Sargent was pretty systematic with how he painted. And it's quite obvious with his self-portraits. thank you for those that are still watching. Those of you that left a like as well, thank you. So far so good, no real difficulties with this. We're letting the acrylic dry fast, let acrylic be acrylic. Making drawing corrections with the shapes. So question for everybody that's here. What would you, if you could ask John Singer Sargent one question, what would you ask him? Of course, painting related. Or YouTube related. For example, you could ask him what his favorite color was. That's a valid question. What would I ask Sargent? If I could ask him one question. What I would ask Sargent, and I've thought about this a lot, and this question changes from time to time, but what I would ask Sargent is, what, I'm thinking of how to word this, but I particularly like kind of like the way paint dries on a palette. And if you've seen the picture of Sargent's palette, his handheld palette, you can see all these nice kind of like mountains of paint, kind of similar to Nelson's palette. So I would ask him how much of that was aesthetics versus just not wanting to clean the palette. Not so much a painting question, but kind of like an aesthetic question. May wrote, did he prefer to paint someone he knew and liked, or strange, or someone he disliked? It's a good question. Oh, that's a good question, Hansel Dog. Also, who was the most difficult to paint? And we've heard all those nightmares about Sargent repainting a hand 40 something times, and his sitters or models would be crying or something whenever he'd have to repaint something. Yeah, I don't know how much of that's really true. All great questions. Hey, Jonas. Welcome, welcome. And of course, this Acrylic Sargents will be for sale at some point in the future. But you won't run into too many of these. You won't run into too many of these. Sargent acrylic studies that look like oil paintings. This is absolutely a blast to paint. Really, really fun. To do something that shouldn't be possible. Especially with, you know, my 45-cent tube of paint. Whereas in the past, even currently, others are using well over $100 a tube of paint. Hey Libertas, welcome, welcome. See, when you paint thicker, it does stay wet a tad bit longer, which is just enough time to negotiate these edges. Acrylic does keep you on your toes, so to speak. So back and forth. When one thing dries, it allows me to go and do that, add more light to it, build the specificity. As it's wet, it allows me to change the planes. We'll invest in a bigger Stay Wet palette at some point in the future. This one's kind of cramped. Or not. I forgot. The camera angle may not even fit a bigger one. A bigger one would be a little easier to use. So I'm kind of cramped for space a little bit with this palette. And what else is really nice about these acrylics is they don't glare quite as much as oil paint. So it's not like I can apply the brush strokes in almost any direction and I don't have too much glare. So it's a very matte surface. Now the transparency of the acrylic paint kind of allows me to see through the layers just like in oil painting. Hey Jonas, what do you think of starting painting aggressively so you know where you're going if you have problems later on? Like filling up the canvas quickly? Yeah, that's fine. I mean, some could argue this painting was started somewhat kind of rough as well, or aggressively. And as long as you're working with mass and you have enough experience with linear drawing, you can always add the linear specificity later. No problems there. I mean, Nelson Shanks did start like that. Brushstrokes everywhere. Every direction. Hansel Dog, whatever happened to my wooden palette with all the paint on it? I got a couple of them that still have a lot of paint on them. They're just sitting behind, they're laying behind me somewhere. But I still have them. Yeah, they're usable. This is resting on top of a palette that has a lot of paint on it, but underneath of it is some bubble wrap. So yeah, it's still usable. If a paint palette still has a lot of paint dried on it, you can even sand it. Of course, wearing a mask and stuff. Sand it outdoors, or have a woodworker sand it down. Of course, it's always going to be usable. Oh, thanks, Jonas. Yeah, of course, you can start a painting. I once started a painting with a smiley face, just to show that it could be done. I once did a painting. Once upon a painting, I used only my left hand. Once upon a painting, I also only used palette knife for a portrait. Oh yeah, there's a lot of freedom in painting. I'm not quite bothered by the, this is a little bit lower than the original. Doesn't bother me too much. I should fill in this value. I'm really happy to answer that age-old question. Can it be done in acrylic? Yes, it can. It can even be done with 45-cent acrylics. Take that, art world. No limits. No limitations. No excuses. Only setbacks. Hey Giselle. Well, I mean, I wouldn't say so much talent, but I'd say, just careful control of values, careful control of shapes of color. Not so much like a talent thing. It's how much time does someone put into their studies? Just like any other subject. Painting is no different. But yeah, definitely, like, the time you put into it is more important than how expensive the material is. For sure. So anybody that's watching this that wants to get into painting but only has access to cheap acrylic paints and cheap cotton canvas panels, not that this is that cheap of a panel, but yeah, there's nothing to hold you back. Just like the Nike thing, just do it. If you put in the time, if you study the right stuff, you can learn pretty fast. So this is the transparency of the paint that I'm talking about. I'm just gonna let the brush run out of paint up here. And you can see the mixtures underneath start to show, just like in oil painting. Let's see, Gisela wrote, he wouldn't know that this was an oil painting by looking at it. No, I haven't worked with, oh, thank you. No, I haven't worked with watercolor yet, though I will. That's gonna be soon. Although I'd have to add an extra day. I'm sure everybody's tired of me already at this point. I'd have to really learn that one. I mean, I put the time in for pastel and for acrylic. Several practice paintings before live streaming acrylic or pastel. I mean, pastel not as much though. Pastel, I just kind of winged it and it kind of worked. And I could potentially just wing acrylic paint. I mean, not acrylic, watercolor, but I don't want to do that to you. I can only get so fortunate, so lucky, I guess. Craftomatic time, tastes, and practice. Yeah, of course. I usually don't emphasize taste that much, but yeah, what you have a natural attraction towards, meaning what's your taste in painting? What do you spend the most time looking at when you go to museums? To me, it's always been portraits. Something about them. They're very quiet, but some of them can be very loud. This one is quiet. More my speed. First time I painted this when I don't know, I was probably like 17, 18. I thought that I would be able to grow out a beard in my 30s, but nope, that didn't happen. So I won't ever really look like Sargent, but at least we can emulate what he does in our YouTube paintings. Hansel Dog, you like portraits too? Something about portraits, but everyone's different. Some people really feel drawn towards landscapes. I even knew someone that was afraid of portraits, like had a phobia of portraits. Have you ever known anyone like that? Like this particular person couldn't even have pictures, like family pictures on the walls. I think's Craftomatic. Oh, I was wondering what I asked. Oh, yeah, so you haven't met someone that has a phobia of portraits, and you wrote, good thing you haven't. Yeah. I mean, the person that I'm speaking of is actually kind of a really nice person. They just have a fear of portraits. I don't get it. But, everybody's different. Well, thanks, Jonas. May wrote, good portraits have always appealed to me. By good, I mean well painted, painterly, and recognizable. Yeah, there's something about I don't know, there's something about the handling of portrait paintings that's just different from every other art form. It's hard to put into words. Yeah, I agree, May. Everybody has different phobias, for sure. That can be difficult to fathom, I understand. Thanks, Mark L, for that comment. A lot of it has to do with the same mentality of handling the shapes of value and color in the same mindset as oil paint, just different timing, slightly different process. And hopefully this will show that you don't have to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars on materials. I've been unfortunate to know some people that look down on others because they couldn't afford the best materials. I've met people like that in the past, and well, the people that couldn't afford the best or the most expensive materials will probably put in more time because they can afford to than the others. It all comes full circle. This is a very deceptive Sargent thing to make a not background, a brush stroke a single brushstroke have so much emphasis on itself. Like that, more pressure, and then let the brush run out. Boom. Like that. You can tell Sargent was right-handed by that particular brush stroke. And Craft-O-Matic. Oh, you were thinking of dating someone who has a fear of portraits. Who would get the pose for you? Yeah, that wouldn't work. If I had met someone that had a phobia of portraits, that wouldn't work. No way. No way. Oh wow, it's almost been another hour, so we only have 4 minutes till the next break. So moving pretty fast. When we return after this break, we'll add those little tiny details like the little highlights on the eyes and little refinements of the shapes here and there. But most of it is already done. Well, thanks, man. I'm glad you like the subtleties. Can't wait to see the time-lapse version of this. Every one of these will become a time-lapse. A short for YouTube and a reel for Instagram. It's another way I'm trying to promote what we do here. Well, thanks for joining, Mark L. We'll be here tomorrow, same time for pastel. Got another friend of mine that I'm gonna paint in pastel tomorrow. It's great to be able to paint people that you know, although these old master studies are really good to do. Eggy cell. Oh, thanks. That the pastels and the acrylics end up looking like oil paintings. I mean, I hope that's a good thing. I don't know. It could be a bad thing depending on who you're asking. But I have learned a lot since the beginning of these streams 4 weeks ago. Oh, good. I'm glad that's a good thing. Okay, so you know what time it is. Second hour has just gone by. For those of you that are still watching live, that means our little superstar Hugo is going to be on the screen again. And soon I'll have some other videos of him. I know I already said that 2 weeks in a row, but I do have some older videos of him. I just haven't really posted them. So maybe we'll put those older videos of Hugo. So when I return, we'll add the subtlety for the eyes, some more of the subtlety for the all around the face, but not really too much left. Yes, so hold on, we missed something here. So May wrote, tutor taught you acrylics using oil type teaching. Made the class paint things that frightened you. Oh, cool. That's interesting. Paint things that frightened you. Or things that were frightening to paint. It's a cool idea, cool concept. Okay, so we are going to take a break and I will return soon. Hopefully you'll enjoy once again the video of Hugo, the amazing Shiba Inu. I will be back in a couple minutes. Okay, I'm back, and now we're gonna finish this off with some details. But first, I'm going to increase the light a little bit, which is not really good for my eyes, so I'm gonna put a visor on. I recommend you take care of your eyes. Don't have a bright light directly above your face. This is really important, especially when you do self-portraits. And I could tell that Sargent, when he did this self-portrait, he used a window. So the window is probably casting a light in this direction. Since there's a highlight on his pupil, that means that he was getting kind of blinded by the light. But this is why you get an old hat and cut the top of the hat and it becomes a visor. All kinds of covered in dust and dog hair. But yeah, okay, so you wrote, oh hey Brian Ross. Oh, thank you. Thank you for that comment. Let's see, did I miss anything? Let's see. So May did things that you felt were hard to do. Oh, good. And let's see, May mixed on the palette and on the painting. Oh, good. Wonderful. How about before we do this, we give the background one last little touch up here. And that's because I want to push the contrast a little bit more. I'm going to use the medium, the liquid glazing medium, because the glossiness will make this look much darker. That's his hair right there. Okay, so we've got the glossiness there. Okay, let's get the brush that we use for the background. By the way, these brushes just remain in a McDonald's cup. That's kind of where they live. Which is another really useful thing about acrylic painting. You can keep your brushes in a cup. Probably not good for the brushes, but again, they're cheap brushes. Woof, that's way too dark. And let it create a soft edge when it meets the edge of the face. So it has more of an oil painting look to it. Something like that. No problem, Craft-O-Matic. It's important we have a nice, rich, thickly painted background. So it helps the skin tones appear a little bit stronger. Letting some of the brush strokes kind of just remain that way is just fine. Now, the details. So let's start off by darkening the darkest areas around the face, the eyes. Hold on a second. I put my iPad on the charger, and I did figure out a little trick to charge my laptop while painting. It seems to be working, so that's a good thing. Alright, the pupil is not going to be straight black, but a little bit reddish, a bit of red. Although it will look straight black relative to everything else. And we'll tweak the light sensitivity on the camera. I did raise the light, but I think it still looks a little dark, so you can't see what I just did. This is a classical convention to put the highlight right on the pupil, in between the pupil and the iris. Something like that. This is a tricky plane here, and all the times I've painted this, that part's always messed me up. So I'm gonna approach it with caution. It's the edge of the cheekbone. But he's made it a little bit uncharacteristically dark. So it almost looks like I don't know, like he had some kind of rash or something on his cheek. I'm approaching it with caution. It may wrote it was a C-O-M. There we go. Now we have that plane. So it's not an easy plane to paint. Oh, thanks, me. I'm glad you like watching me paint. Yeah, I mean, my goal is maybe at one point in my life to go on tour and to do paintings like this, like in different cities and stuff. I used to mention that more often when I had first started my YouTube channel. I did it once. I did travel to a local art school, did a demo, then got hired there to teach some classes for a little while, but the commute was just too much. And of course, a very Sargent-like area that can't be ignored is that little brush stroke that he did. Very Sargent-y thing to do. Inventing new words. Yeah, commuting isn't fun. It's nice to be spoiled and work from home. Sargent brush strokes. Some more planes for the facial hair. And blur out the edge. You know, I wonder if Sargent wearing that hat might have had some Rembrandt kind of influence. And this is on canvas, by the way, so I'm kind of growing out of those sheets of canvas that I used to paint on. So now, as I'm painting, I'm hoping that I'm creating something that somebody out there would want. softening this cast shadow now. Very important to make it look soft because that's what will give it that distinguishing window light looking shadow. Alright, getting close to the grand finale here. And thank you so much for those of you that are watching this live. Everyone that's left a like. Everyone that's watching this after it was recorded. A lot of years of experience goes into this. So just because it's been done in only 3 hours, don't let that deceive you. I've had a lot of years of experience. This is partly for entertainment purposes, but also to show you what's possible. You know, 18-year-old me wouldn't have known that I'd be able to do this with acrylic, that it was even possible. But it is. You don't need to use the most expensive equipment. Painting soft edges in acrylic it doesn't have to be that hard if you mix the right value in between your planes like this. And I don't always get the right value right away. Sometimes I have to really work at it to get the right value. But I got it that time. A light touch, using the transparency of the paint. Nice and simple. Soft edge for the facial hair. I'm going to retouch the background. Oh, but first, curvature. Of the hat. that Sargent brush stroke. So black and yellow, a little bit of ultramarine blue. Charge the paintbrush up. Using the background to create a softer edge for the hat is pretty useful. Again, black and yellow. So hopefully this answers the question. Sargent, painting like Sargent with acrylic. Is that even possible? And the answer is yep. Yep. It's possible. Even the color. 45-cent tubes of paint. What's up? You can use 45-cent tubes of paint. Not that that's the retail value, but that's just a random sale from Office Depot. And my message is, if I can do this, anyone could do this. And that's because anyone that can draw can paint. Anybody can learn to draw. All it takes is the right teaching, determination, and of course you have to enjoy it. Hey, Hansel dog. You're right. Anyone can draw. It just takes 5 years, 3 months, 2 weeks, 4 days, 25 minutes. That is very specific. But yeah, as long as it takes. As long as it takes. Whatever it takes. But I do strongly believe anyone can learn this. You just have to put the time. And if it takes 5 years, 3 months, 2 weeks, 4 days, 25 minutes, then that's what it takes. But it also helps to have the right guidance, of course. It just expedites the time, makes it much, much faster. Okay, let's fix the background a little bit. Not that I have to, but that curves in more. Giselle wrote, he said, had a professor say that everyone has to paint 1,000 bad paintings before they get good. Well, that's also quite specific. It could come sooner, or sometimes it can come later. But everybody does take off at some point. I've seen some people paint way longer than me, and I've seen some people paint way less than me, and there's people that have painted less than me that have learned way more than I ever will. There's people that painted way more than me that are not quite there, and a lot of it really just depends on the right teaching, the motivation, and really just more than anything, it's the discipline. You have to be willing to willing to make changes, willing to learn, willing to try a new material. I never had an acrylic teacher. I picked this up from my knowledge of oil painting. But, you know, the fundamentals are universal, and I'll say that the strong fundamentals are really, really the most important thing. Having strong fundamentals. But yeah, I think that's about it. I'm gonna stand up and double check, but I think that's about it. I don't really see much different. Anything that different that needs anything that needs to be changed. Now normally I would flip the painting over to see it from a different perspective, but since I will be time-lapsing this, that would make it kind of weird. I could also edit that part out, but I don't feel like it. So I'm quite surprised with the color that I was able to get. And like I said, I think some of that has to do with the fact that I had a brighter yellow to use. So that definitely helped. They said it couldn't be done. They said that it was impossible. But you can paint a Sargent with acrylics. It is totally possible. If I could do it, you could do it. Just covering up some of these little shapes. Also just letting the brush strokes look like brush strokes a little bit. Thanks, Ansel Dog. Yeah, I think that'll be it. I won't bore you with the signature part, or maybe I will. Yeah, we'll see. Let's see, if you have any last minute questions, let me know now. See one little spot that I missed. That's why it's important to stand back or sit back. Now be cautious with these changes in acrylic, because one wrong move and you have a value that is going to dry right away that you don't want. But that's fine because it does dry right away. Not that big of a deal. You can edit it as you go. You definitely need a stay wet palette for this one. Well, thank you, May. Thanks, Craft-O-Matic. Hansel Dog. I have not used gouache. Again, another one I can learn. Have not used gouache. But let's go ahead and sign this. While we wait, if there are any questions, I want to get the signing part and in the video. Not black, but something lighter than black that's still dark. And I hope everyone stays safe with this holiday weekend. And with this one, I'm just going to sign 24 for the year. So that the signature fits the composition. Now, I haven't used gouache, but again, always something we can learn. So as always, thank you so much for watching. Remember, the schedule is Wednesday oil painting, Thursday acrylic, and Friday pastel. I wish you all the very best. And yes, you can paint a John Singer Sargent with acrylics. It is totally possible. I wish you all the very best, and I'll see you on the next one. Which means I'll see you tomorrow.